This is the ALGO Podcast, episode 9 with Andor Mihaly. We talk a lot about the overlap between philosophy and fitness, how the two go hand in hand, how fitness and training plays a massive part in self-identity, as well as life in general, and what kind of lessons you can learn from it too. We talk a bit about this idea of perfection, progress, imperfect action versus perfect inaction. Talk a lot about philosophers before, and a little bit of existentialism too. So I hope you guys enjoy. Leave any comments down below. And the video did cut out 4 minutes before we finished. That's my bad. I did not plan for it to be 2.5 hours long, but my storage ran out. So it cuts a bit short when we're talking about how Socrates was a short, fat, old man. So I hope you guys enjoy. Take care. Your brand is sort of physicalosophy. Can you take us through what that actually means to you?
So when I had to pick a name for my online presence, when I realized that I need an online presence of some sort, I wanted something that's catchy. It turned out to be a bit of a tongue breaker, to be fair. However, it melts two worlds together that are really meaningful to me. One is an attraction towards something that is philosophical and more related to mind and questioning, constantly searching for answers. And the other one is related to the body and what I physically do and what I want to physically do with other people as well, helping them on their physical journey or exercise journey. So I came up with this name, and I love wordplay as well, so I thought it would be a good enough melting pot of the two worlds. So it turned out to be physicalosophy.
You've got the wordplay because then in your bio you've got Jack of all trades, master of some, which is obviously a play on Jack of all trades, master of none. What's the meaning of that wordplay?
So Jack of all trades would obviously relate to the fact that you're not just doing one thing, because I don't believe that with the audience that we're working with, you don't just do one thing. You're not just specifically preparing them for a given competition in a given sport. So you have to be, to a certain extent, Jack of all trades, showing them different methods, different exercises, different venues. However, if I say master of none, then I would also say that I'm not really good at anything, which I don't think is true. So when I get into a certain specific field within health and fitness, I do try my best to be a master of it, or master it to as high degree as I can. So hence I sort of tweaked it a little bit, and that's Jack of all trades, master of some. Yeah, that's how it came to existence.
So these different trades that you explored, can you describe what your training journey has been throughout your life in the different phases? So like guys usually have like the bodybuilding phase and then the powerlifting phase or whatever. What was your one?
So it did have phases, of course. However, my connection to physicality started at a very early age. I was a really active child. My first love was football. So I played football day and night, all the time, and then I was relatively successful at a young age, playing for a team, talented young football player, before I fell in love with basketball. And then at about 16 or the age of 16, 17, I realized that there is an individual sport, or at the time it wasn't really considered a sport, bodybuilding. So I did have that bodybuilding phase, but the institution of a gym where you go down and lift weights in order to get stronger, bigger, more masculine, that was a thing. So when I first went down, it appealed to me that there are no teammates here. You don't rely on other people. It's what you put in, you get out, which is not necessarily true, but to a certain extent it is. And I did see an instant progress, so I was reactive to the stimulation that I received there. And also at the time, during my teenage years, I did have some troubles in my life, and I think it was sort of dealing with that trauma that had happened at the time, on sort of like enacting on it physically. So that was an important part of it as well, but that I only realized in retrospective. So going down, lifting some heavy shit as a form of physical therapy had helped me big time, and it's helping me ever since.
Do you think that, this is a little bit of a tangent, but do you think that the way the society is going now with the education system and kids and whatever, that there should be more of a push to try and channel, whether it's kids' aggression or just some kind of healthy outlet, that more kids should be promoted to try weightlifting or physical fitness? I think we've slacked a little bit. Like if you look at the old videos that went viral online of at some kind of 20th century, like 80s, 70s, 90s, what the American high schools used to be like they were doing pull-ups, dips, the monkey bars, all sorts of things. Do you think we're slacking a little bit on that as time goes on? Kids are getting fatter.
Kids are getting fatter, but it's not necessarily just because of lack of that popularization of physical fitness. It's because the instant availability of internet, smartphones, obviously food that's not necessarily associated with health and fitness as well, could be or should be a propaganda for pushing physical exercise, not necessarily gym or lifting weights, but any movement that they enjoy doing, I would say. And that's almost a cliche in other parts of the world, like say in Brazil, in the favelas where people have no money whatsoever. What do kids do? They go out, play football, and obviously the most talented ones who are genetically geared towards becoming football players, they rise up and they become the Pelés and Neymars of the world. Or in the United States of America, poor kids go do boxing or basketball, and again, the archetype of that is becoming the superstar basketball player. For example, LeBron James, obviously Michael Jordan. They're coming from very poor families, and now they internationally recognized as some of the best athletes ever. So I think it's there. That option is there, but if the question is how much it should be controlled from up there, then I would say maybe we could do more efforts, yes. But is it the responsibility of the government or the higher powers? What do you think?
I think one of the biggest priorities, I mean, this is putting aside conspiracy theories that the government wants us all slaves and blah, 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 but idealistically speaking, if we take that away, I think one of the main priorities of any governing body or power or whatever should be the well-being of the kids, first and foremost, to set up future generations. As a side tangent of the tangent, I think one of the things that they are slacking the most on is child nutrition. So everything to do with kids. So if you're talking about what's one of the most beneficial things you can do for any children, let alone widespread, to set up better future for your society, better people, fitness, 100%. And I would actually say some form of gym, because sport and movement is great, but muscle mass as much as they can, or strength, is very underrated as well, which actually leads me into the other question. I've heard there's this fitness, I don't know, I think she's a medical doctor, not that it matters, but she makes this point that the population, the problem is not that we're too fat, it's that we're too under-muscled. So if you look at the body composition of someone who's, let's say any man who's like 30 or 40% fat, that's a fairly-ish high range to be in. But if you've got a much higher percentage, I forget percentage, if you just have more lean mass under that fat, I think from a health perspective, you are still much better off than the man who has the same body fat, but they have the skinny fat, where it's the lack of muscle. What do you think of that? Do you think we're too fat, or do you think we're under-muscled, or both?
I think it's a bit of both. Probably it's there is a middle ground there. We do have, well, it's interesting because we both operate as personal trainers in a mainstream gym. I think we live in a bubble. So people that we see on a daily basis are not true representation of the society that we live in. So for that reason, when I look around, my perception of how fit the society is probably false. Because so all the data that's coming out of how obese the population is, that's not what I experience personally on a daily basis, and that's probably not what you see either.
Nope.
If we have a client that's got a little bit of extra fat on them, that would be, compared to the average of our gym, somebody who's not in a great shape. However, compared to the average citizen walking down the street, probably they are still in a very acceptable physical condition, right? So yeah, basically what I do agree with what you said. We do need more muscle, more strength, and then later down the line as well, according to studies and research done for longevity, obviously that would help us later down the line. And how to control body fat is another issue that there are different opinions about, isn't it?
We will get into that a little bit later. Definitely my perception of it is very warped as well, and I forget that sometimes because, you know, body dysmorphia and self-image and whatever. Our gym, even by gym standards, has a lot of very fit people in it. I remember the old gym I came from, I wasn't by any means great. I wasn't a massive fish. I was just like a big-ish fish, metaphorically, not size-wise, in a small pond. So my fitness was good, but it was just because I felt higher because everyone around me was piss poor. Then I came to this gym and I was like, whoa, this is like, there are people who are stronger, more mobile, more flexible, faster. Everything I thought I excelled at, it's like you're in the next league now. And it's important, especially as trainers, to keep that perspective, because the image of myself that I have is probably not what everyone else sees. So there was this distinct moment I remember, because all I do in my life is basically, I'm in the gym, I'm dancing. That's it. Dancing, you get a lot more less fit people, but they're still moving somehow. So they're still healthier than the average. I remember this one picture was taken of just me and friends out while we were dancing, and I was huge compared to them. And that was such a moment for me. I was like, is this how they see me? Because if I look at myself on my own, okay, not much. But then I see them, I'm physically like 1.5 times their size. And I'm so like not used to being in rush hours, for example. When I hit that peak on the trains or the public transport, whatever, just in the street, I look around and everyone is so miserable, out of shape. But just the out of shape part, like so many people just look on their face like they're not, their vitality is low. Like in a game, if you've been afflicted by a sick item or something. So yeah, that perspective is something to maintain.
Just as you said, vitality, I think that's a key word in the very definition of fitness as well. Because we use this term health and fitness. This is the industry that we operate in as well. However, how would we define fitness and health? That's the question as well. That's to do with vitality. That's to do with being able to perform tasks on a daily basis optimally. That's for our bodies to function optimally and obviously healthily as well, meaning that there's a lack of illness there, a lack of injury. However, if you are above that threshold, then are you really training for health and fitness? Because you're already there. You can already operate injury-free and healthily. You don't have problem getting out of bed. You have enough energy to perform your daily tasks. And then, if that's already fulfilled, then why are you striving for more progress? Why do you want to lift the bigger weight? Why do you want to do skills that you currently cannot do? So those are the questions that I sometimes ask myself. So obviously we're addicted to this shit, right? You and me, personal trainers in general, coming from different sports background or committing to this job for various reasons, but we became personal trainers because we are extremely passionate about what we do. Because in this day and age, 2024, I think all the cowboys who got into this industry because they thought there's money in it, those days are gone. You need to know your shit if you enter this industry, otherwise you're not going to stay in it, right? So it's it's basically, if in order to survive, you need to be good enough, and you need to be fit enough, and you need to have enough passion for it. However, we already fit enough. What are we doing here? What do you think of that? Like, why are we constantly trying to progress and not being fine with wherever we already are?
I think that is because as humans, we are always driven to want to progress and seek the challenge. Our challenge just happens to be in the realm of physical fitness where we want to excel. So if I had to give some vague standard for what fitness is, because when we think fit, we think, let me lose weight, let me get stronger, which is, but I think you also need a certain level of mobility, certain level maybe flexibility, speed, maybe some agility, the ability to jump. Put all that together, as well as strong and enough lean mass and less fat, I would say that is someone who is fit and healthy. Then the standard becomes different in terms of what do you do. If you're a professional athlete, your version of fit is compared to everyone you're around, which is a lot higher, so you have to do it. If you're a librarian, you can do the bare minimum and get away with it. We have reached the minimum of what we need to just be fit for life. We are probably thriving, we're not just surviving anymore, but I also enjoy getting stronger. I enjoy getting more mobile, whereas I know a lot of the people and a lot of my clients, they don't necessarily enjoy it for fun, even though we try and make it fun. They just do it just so they stay healthy. But we are lucky in that, I say this to my clients sometimes, that I am in a sense the same as a heroin addict, because he's doing what he likes. I just am too doing what I like. I'm just fortunate that I don't like heroin. That's it. So the difference is we've reached that peak, but we just happen, like, I want to improve. I want to eventually do, how many years, a one-arm handstand, just because it's cool. I want to do the splits one day, just because it's cool. Then you have the element of, okay, I also dance quite a lot, so I need now healthier hips, healthier knees. What does that mean? They can take more volume, more thrashing, more use, strengthen the tendons, everything like that. So that would be my answer.
That's true, and I do agree. And obviously that I live in this world as well. I constantly want to progress in whatever I put my head up to. However, I just find it sometimes slightly hypocritical that we say something to our clients, you should aim for optimal and this is where you should be, whilst we sometimes go well over that threshold and risking certain things in order to make that progress, if you know what I mean. Okay. And we're not professional athletes. We are in the industry. Obviously we want to lead by example. However, and this is just us, but if you look at other figures within the industry as well, they are pushing health and fitness. However, they are chemically enhanced. They suffer from things that obviously they don't post about online, and still whatever they present to their audience is, I would say, force or just a slice of that pie.
So are you saying the hypocrisy is that even though we're telling them to be optimal and get that baseline, we are going above it knowing it might actually risk the health that we've acquired along the way?
Yes, obviously, if you're smart enough, but sometimes you need to just hold your horses and restrict yourself from doing certain things. However, I do agree that if you say like, but sometimes you need to experience the other side in order to know where that threshold is, where that barrier is. We all had injuries because we did silly things. I had, probably you had. Everyone who pushed their bodies really hard suffered injuries, and then they look back on it and said, oh my God, I should have done that. What a silly thing to do. I would not do that with an actual client. As an outsider, I would have said, stop there, don't do another rep, don't lift that weight, stop here. That's enough. However, when it gets to ourselves, we have slightly different values, and within the heat of the moment, we sometimes can act differently to our values, right?
I think the difference would be, is it hypocrisy or... So for example, I am quite fortunate. I haven't had many injuries, but I know many people who have. injuries typically happen not because you do something wrong, because you do something your body is not used to. I popped my meniscus a little bit a few months ago, not because I did it wrong, but because the sheer volume of leg work that I did, I was not used to because I hadn't trained that hard for a while. And obviously I was training with a friend, so you kind of get carried away and you push yourself. So it was the volume that popped my knee out. It was those pistol squats at the end of the weighted sissy squats and everything that messed me up. Aside from that, aside from like small accidents, like when I was doing dips with AT, I just landed on my ankle funny and I was swollen for a day. The other one was when I was in uni and I had the genius idea that now would be the perfect time to start waking up at 3:30 every day and go immediately to the gym. And I mean, like, I'd wake up at 3:30 and I'd be in the gym by 3:45. I would immediately get dressed and just jog there. Body's not warm, nothing. I'm still kind of half phased. And then let me go into heavy sets of triples on deadlifts. I remember I was doing, I think, 160, second set of 3. Second rep, as soon as I started the lift, I just felt an immediate sharp jolting down my back. Immediately I let go and I sat down, started to panic a little bit. Then I struggled to stand up for 5 minutes. I was like, oh, that's my life over. I'm gonna be crippled for the rest of my life. Luckily, I was okay. My point with that is that I don't think would be hypocritical because it was just me ignorant of. With hindsight, I should have known, don't lift that heavy when you just woke up 15 minutes ago, when maybe I needed more food, hell, even a proper warm-up system. The ankle injury accidents, like it could happen with my clients, they just land funny. The knee, if I was with a client, I would be able to tell them, don't push yourself that much. So when they say, like if they're doing something new and they say, oh, I can go heavy, I'm like, I know you can. But I don't think you're ready for it yet. You've got the technique and we're going just heavy enough, but let's do another week or two, get your body acclimatized to it, then we can start to push you so that you don't risk anything because we're in it for the long run. But then I would say, what if, because a lot of the time when we push ourselves too much in the gym, at least what I think, when we push ourselves a lot in the gym and we're going like crazy and we're fighting our demons and whatever you want to call it, it is because we are choosing to invest all of our negative energy into this as opposed to dealing with or facing the consequences of what's happening up here if we didn't channel it all in there. So if a client came to me and something horrible had happened and they said, you know what, today I just want to go ham, I would still try and do it in a smart way, but I think but then I'm getting paid to make sure they're not injured, so maybe not me. But if I was a friend, I would do it. So maybe because there's a bit of professionalism there, I prioritize their physical safety more than that. So actually, that's an interesting one. I don't know what to make of it.
I mean, maybe hypocritical was a bit harsh word or expression.
A slight double standard.
Because ideally you learn from your mistakes and you're not gonna, that's less likely to happen again in the future. And the older you get, the more years you spend with physical exercise, with pushing your body to extremes, the less of these mistakes are being made, right? So that's one thing that I've been trying to implement as now I'm getting a little bit older. I'm technically a middle-aged man. So the priority of my training these days is not getting injured. And so basically finding that thin line where I am still overloading, ideally progressively overloading my muscles, my body, in whatever forte I want to master. However, possibly trying to minimize the risk of injury. And that's what I've just finished it turned out to be, I planned 6 months of bulking. So basically spending time in caloric surplus in order to gain muscle and strength. So I haven't done it in years. And the main goal was avoiding injury and putting on muscle and gaining strength in most of the compound lifts that I now do and they were part of my program now. And I succeeded in that. Could I have gained more muscle, more strength, risking more? Likely so. However, I'm really happy that I now can start the next phase of training, the next macro cycle, so to say, with being injury-free and go on that venture, right? So I think but for this, you need a certain reflection on what you've already done, on the mistakes that you've previously made as well. Because I did silly things. I did similar to what you just mentioned, your injuries has happened as well. I reflected on them. However, sometimes I did pay a price of my lats getting injured and I couldn't do certain movements to a certain quality for a long time. And I was annoyed at myself. So right now, I just don't want to do it again.
That ties in very nicely to, how do you think that your own drive or motivation has changed throughout the years of your training? So now you're older, you have a family, you prioritize your health much more than if you were younger and single and you had no responsibilities. Do you think that or to what extent has your training style been influenced by this change in desire? So this one I think would be a bit more cut and dry because you have family, so you have more responsibility, so you need to take care of yourself more. But someone in my case, for example, so 4 years ago I did powerlifting. I happened to also have a lot more negative emotions in my head and I had a lot more to channel into it, and it complemented the two very well. Heavy lifting, 1-2 reps, whatever, 5 reps, angry guy. Now I'm a lot more calm and I do more mobility, calisthenics, whatever, less intense, less let me just sit in 5 minutes and just get in my head about everything. Do you think that I was drawn to powerlifting because of the emotions I had and the phase of my life I was at? Or do you think the emotions were also amplified because of the training style I chose to do? And similarly, do you think I've transitioned more towards mobility and relaxing because I am more relaxed? Or am I a bit more relaxed because I changed my style?
It's basically about connecting body and mind to an extent. So I do believe that they are interconnected. So whatever you might get into outside the gym, whatever you read, wherever your head's at, it does reflect in your training style as well. That's one of the reasons why I changed my training style a few years ago. I believe it was about 5 or 6 years ago when I sort of changed from that natural bodybuilding that was my training style beforehand and powerlifting to more gymnastics and more figuring out what my body's capable of, rather than just focusing on aesthetics and strength. Because let's face it, most people who go to a gym, who pick up physical exercise, appearance is the number one reason. They want to lose weight, they want a six pack, they just want to look better. They want to look attractive to the other sex, or the same sex, or just to other people, just to themselves. They want to look in the mirror and say, "Ah, that's a sexy motherfucker," right? So I looked in the mirror and I saw an athletic body that I was more or less happy with. However, that body wasn't able to perform tasks that, in my opinion, it should have been able to perform. For example, just getting to concrete exercises, I could not do ring muscle ups. I was miles away from doing splits. I couldn't do pistol squats. So these are obviously, considering the average population, these are obviously high-level tasks. However, if you're a well-trained individual, these should be within reach. And when I looked at myself, I saw a body that should be capable, but it isn't. And that was the driving force behind the changes that I made, and behind the sort of like the research that I've done within these methods, how to achieve this, how to get there. And I can be quite methodological in terms of studying how to get from point A to point B. Whether or not I'm talented enough within that niche of training is another thing. I did try Olympic weightlifting before as well. I did a lot of research. I tried to master it. I don't think I'm made for it. I don't think that my body ratio, my strengths and weaknesses would make me a great weightlifter. However, with body weight training, it turned out that for certain things, my body is definitely good, genetically good enough, and I'm talented enough as well to progress. However, some of the mistakes that I made at the time, and I'm trying to correct now, focusing far too much on movement. At the time, movement preparation was a big thing. It came along, like instead of warm up, jogging 5 minutes on the cross trainer, or sorry, on the treadmill, or doing 5 minutes on the cross trainer, you do specific movements to prepare the body for the tasks ahead. And now the problem with that is, if as long as it is movement preparation, you're good. However, if it's elongated to 20, 30 minutes, that would take the place of the actual training. By the time you get to the important bits, you're already tired, right? So I did make that mistake. I don't know whether or not you made it.
Oh yeah.
And I am trying to compensate right now for it. So make sure that I do some movement prep, but it's short and it's not the main focus of the sesh. The main focus is something else, right? But back to your original question, yeah, I do believe that body and mind is connected. So whatever you do in the gym is a reflection of who you are at the time.
So that brings up two questions of everything you just said. And I definitely went through that phase as well. It's that phase where it's like it's not quite like the Dunning-Kruger effect, but it's like a similar graph where you're ignorant of everything fitness related, you don't particularly care about all of it. Then when you're aware of how much there is, you get carried away with it all, trying to optimize everything and all this bollocks like, oh my God, the glycemic index, do I eat brown rice or white rice before my training? It's gonna make the difference. Do I need to have my meal, my protein 30 or 60 minutes after my training? Am I gonna become catabolic? All this nonsense. So I went through that definitely, especially with warm-ups like foam rolling, stretching, especially because when you're in school, you're taught that you need to do, like, the way to warm up for sports is, it's like pulse raiser, dynamic stretching, something. Now, for something that's very full body and a big sport, like martial arts, for example, that would be the warm up I would do. Still, I would do a pulse raiser, get everything warm up everything, dynamic swings. But, and this is when clients always get confused when they ask about warm ups, when it comes to weightlifting or resistance training rather, strength training, I don't think that's necessary at all unless you have specific problem areas you want to get better at. But when they say, what do I need to do to warm up for squats? You do lighter squats. What do I do to get better at this? You just do more of this. So 100% I went through that phase. The two questions that comes up are, you said that it got to a point where you looked in the mirror, you were happy with what you saw, but it couldn't do what you wanted it to. There was a video or a TikTok of some woman that went viral a few months, maybe even a year ago, and it was just gym people like shitting on her. Her video was in an attempt to shame people. She said, if you go to the gym purely for aesthetic reasons, you are not concerned with your health, you are fat phobic. What do you think of that?
Say it again, please.
If you
What's the actual quote?
I might be paraphrasing, but the message is, if you go to the gym purely for aesthetic reasons, you don't care about your health, you are fat phobic. And it like said with that kind of tone.
What do I think of that? So that two ways around it. One, if you go to the gym for aesthetic reasons, in order to progress, you still need to do tons of work, and you're still going to progress in strength, in mobility, most likely in other avenues as well. So, for example, professional bodybuilders as well, they are the ones who focus on their aesthetics the most. That's what they are being judged on. However, you're not going to see a professional bodybuilder who cannot lift a certain amount of weight, who cannot do a certain amount of volume on a certain exercise. That doesn't happen. There are no weaker professional bodybuilders than us. So there is a correlation there. Is it the good way around approaching fitness? For some people it can be the catalyst, and then they just take it from there. I don't believe that you need to be fat phobic. What does that even mean? That you look down on anyone who is fat? You look down on yourself because you are not in a certain physical shape? The catch-22 in the fitness world, by the way, is that when I looked in the mirror, when you look in the mirror, when anyone looks in the mirror, and we say that we're happy with what we say, what we see, you're never 100% happy. You always, in your head, you always think that, yes, but it could be better. And it doesn't matter how you look, that notion is always there. It could be better. And we're never happy with it. So there's no middle way, right? That's what you're trying to find, but you never really find it. Unless you obviously shift your focus solely on performance, that can be a possible solution. So then you're not as much concerned with your aesthetics and your appearance, and it works. However, in my opinion, it comes in waves. So sometimes you focus on one thing and then your interest goes into other things, and then it comes back. So like there's a natural sort of like roller coaster, right?
Yeah, I think the minute you set a goal for yourself in anything, you are also by default saying it is now possible for me to fail at it. And it's the same as like when I was in school, I would never really study for any of the science or maths tests because I was naturally good at it, but mostly because I was afraid to fail. And I thought to myself, okay, if I don't even try, like if I put zero effort into studying and I get like a B or even an A or whatever, I could pride myself on it because, yeah, I didn't do any work, I just got that. But in reality, that is a mask for being afraid to fail, because if I studied, I would have got better marks. But then the minute you try, you are opening yourself up to fail. In the same way, if you start to want to improve your body, the minute you go from being not unconscious of how you look, but not prioritizing it as something in your life, then you start to actively work towards it. You are now saying, this is where I want to be to succeed. I associate success with this. By default, this now is failure. And unfortunately, there's a lot of like new social media liberal stuff where it's like you're perfect just the way you are and blah, 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 which I completely disagree with. I think it's the biggest load of nonsense ever. If someone is struggling in anything, let's say their body, and you just make them want to accept them for what they are, there is nothing more disheartening. No, there's nothing more, I think, inspiring or eye-opening or motivating than being told you can do better. You can accomplish so much more. So it's funny actually you bring that up. That's what I tell my clients all the time. When you said the way to potentially minimize the dislike of your own body image is to shift more towards performance-based stuff. 100% that is what helped with my body. You take a certain trainer we have in the gym that we know very well, who's very self-conscious about how he looks, but he looks great. A big reason is like, childhood traumas and whatever that is still manifesting. But a lot of the time, if your goal is to train to look a certain way, you are more likely to get the dysmorphia. That's why bodybuilders have the highest rate of it.
I agree with that, yeah.
So every time I tell my clients, they're like, I want to lose weight. I'm like, okay, we will, but that's not going to be the goal. I want you to sleep better, I want you to get stronger, I want you to feel better, and then if we control the calories well, then your weight will come down, then your fat will come down. It's in the same way in life, I guess, when people say like, oh, I want to be happy in life. I don't. Happiness is like weight loss. If you aim for weight loss, you're never going to be happy with the weight loss. If you aim for happiness, you're never going to be happy with the happiness. If you aim for fulfillment, satisfaction, then the happiness is like a nice little byproduct and you can appreciate it. And you said something. What did you say? You said satisfied. Yeah, when I look in the mirror, I am not satisfied at all. But I am happy because my goals are now my training goals and physical goals are dance, very much so. How I control my body in certain isolations, whatever I can do. And how I can do partner turns and technique, but also my handstand ability, my movement ability, as opposed to just, okay, today I'm training shoulders and back. Well, no, I'm training push. I want to get 44 kilos, 10 reps on the shoulder press. Whatever my shoulders look like, I will be happy with. So I think that's definitely something that's not talked about. If you prioritize looking a certain way, you're more likely to be miserable about it. And with the whole fat phobic thing, it's a bunch of nonsense. Just like, I don't think, let's take someone who's really overweight, really fat. I don't think you need to shame them, even though I think probably just men, a small minority, would want to get shamed, so it helps them push forwards. But putting that aside, this idea of...
It is a slippery slope, obviously. According to the zeitgeist, you go in against the waves if you even dare to use certain words or even being politically incorrect, right? But back to the training principles, specificity is still a big one though. It's like if you want to get a specific outcome, you most likely need to apply methods that lead you towards that goal.
Yep.
So for example, when somebody approaches you that they want to look a certain way, obviously in your head, yes, I know what I want to do, and I want to work on mobility, on components of fitness, rather than just getting you looking a certain way, right? But you need to be you need to be good enough with words and a good enough salesman as well to sell these methods to them, and they need to be intelligent enough to understand deal with that information and say and buy into that, right?
Definitely. Don't get me wrong, if someone says I want to lose weight, I'm not going to be like, no, we're going to get you stronger. What I would say to them is, you will lose weight, because the beautiful thing is everything we do in the gym is about what we can do and how we feel. Everything about how you look, more or less, is nutrition and what happens outside. So not only are you going to look good, but we're also going to focus on you feeling better, because the last thing you'd want to do is lose weight, look in the mirror, like what you see, but feel like you're 20 years older than you are. So we're going to have you looking good and feeling sexy at the same time. It's one thing to look sexy, it's another thing to feel it. I know that I have probably lost a little bit, or however much muscle mass, since I stopped powerlifting and since I've changed my training, because I'm physically training less and I'm dancing more, so more cardio, different proportions now. I know that by my standards, I would want more muscle to look sexier, but even though I have less, I look in the mirror, because of what I now can do, I feel sexier. So 100%, you got to phrase it in a certain way. In the same way, if someone goes like, someone comes to you and says, oh, I want to tone up, my immediate instinct would be, that's not a thing, here's what it is. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean, go on. When in reality, we know toning isn't a thing. They just mean more mass, more lean mass, less fat. But I feel like if we shut them down by saying it, it maybe alienizes them a little bit. Whereas if we just tell them we do understand, we just translate what that actually means in our head. So yeah, got to be a bit salesy.
But also connecting to all this, there's one thing that's questionable for me within the standards of the industry is goal setting. Like we set a goal, that's almost like a no nonsense thing, right? Like you set a goal to your client in 12 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever. You've set a certain goal aesthetically or strength-wise. Okay, the two options, right? One, they don't fulfill, they don't get to that goal. What that leaves them obviously sad, desperate. Oh, I'm not good enough. I didn't reach that goal. Then of course you have to be a good enough salesman to tell them why they didn't reach that goal and how they're gonna reach it, on whose fault it was. Was it your fault? Was it their fault? Who knows? Maybe a bit of both. Maybe it's this or that party. Option two, they did reach that goal. Now what's next? They probably pushed really hard to get to that goal. Then obviously you need to be very good with your skill, within your skill set of trainer to periodize the next cycle, and they need to buy into that method as well. However, if the goal is a bit more long-term, as of creating habits, making sure that we're not doing this for 8 weeks, 12 weeks, but for a lifetime, then a goal can be hitting the gym 3-4 times a week for a certain period of time, and let's reassess where you are then and where to go forward, but not giving them a specific goal. I understand that a specific goal can be helpful, but it can be a burden as well. It can be something that you're really afraid of, right? So of course, for that reason, you need to know the person you're dealing with. So it comes down to your skills of assessing the person. Who are they? What kind of people are they? What's the best approach with that person?
Definitely, 100%. I'm grateful because a lot of my clients are in it for the long run. If someone comes to me and specifically says, I have a wedding in 3 months that I want to look great for, I'm like, cool. They might drop off after the wedding, but this is what they are trying to do now. Over time, as I train them, I will try and get a certain mindset in them so that they can keep doing it. But that is definitely what I stress the most. It's like I say, forget the number, forget whatever, unless you know that's what you need. I want to get you into habit building because then the results will come. And just like with weight loss, the tricky thing is as well, because especially if you start resistance training, your weight might actually go up, even though your fat is going down. You might recomposite yourself. Recompose, body recomposition, whatever. One of my clients, he came to me when he was, I think 125 or 130 kilos or something, and in the span of maybe it's been a year and a half, he is now down to, no, he was about 120. I want to say he's about 108. So let's say it was a year. Let's say he lost 12 kilos in 12 years. 1 kilo a month, you might think is not a lot, but you can see he's built some muscle underneath as well. If you just look at how his frame has filled out, even though he still has the layers of insulation over it, his strength has gone way up. Started doing, for example, assisted pull-ups on like 70 or 80 to help him up. Now we just the other day did like 5 reps at 32. That's huge. So that's also something tricky to consider, because especially with the association that average general population people have with the number on the scale. Like, I want that number to go down. Like, whoa. That's your bones, that's your water weight, that's your muscle, that's everything. Don't be disheartened if the number goes up once we start training. More carbohydrates stored in you, more water weight, more lean mass. So yeah, I agree. It very much depends on who it is you get and then your skill as the trainer to figure out what the best approach is. But there are still those overlooking principles that you can apply to it all.
But also, if you shift our focus back to standards within the fitness industry, one big thing that determine whether or not you a good PT is what results you get with clients. Yep. Now, how is that measured? Before and after picture. Mm-hmm. Well, not necessarily with every personal trainer, but there are these specialists who specialize on transformations, right?
Yeah.
Now I want to see a third picture as well. I want to see a picture before, after, and usually, after. And then 3 to 6 months later.
Oh yes.
How does that Homo sapien look at that point?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is it maintainable? Mm-hmm. Have they kept progressing, or they just relapsed to where they were before, or even worse? Because we all know how long you can stay in a calorie deficit that probably produce that second picture, right? Because usually what happens with these transformations, you see a picture of an average human being, body fat percentage somewhere between 20 and 30%, I would say. Second picture, they have a six-pack. They have a fucking six-pack. If it's a woman, they are sexy, right? So the body fat percentage goes down, muscle mass maintained, or even slightly, if we talk about a beginner, it is possible that the muscle mass has gone up. Is it maintainable?
You'll have to see. You'll need that picture.
And I don't even go into other methods that some, especially prep coaches, use, how they assist their clients, athletes, to get that second picture. Because there are dirtier methods than just manipulating their caloric intake and training as well. And that obviously now that I would say is misleading your audience or the average person. They think that it is doable because they see that was done on another person, so I should look like that. I can reach it. Yes, you can within reason, but the long-term results are the ones that we should focus on, I believe, within this industry.
I agree. The exceptions would be people who, me personally, I wouldn't train, but some coaches do, the people who are wanting to get stage ready, or the people who are cutting weight for fights, because the way they do it, unfortunately, they prioritize the number and the leanness and the body fat over everything else, health, whatever. So when bodybuilders are prep ready, they feel terrible. Like the fat, average people think that it's maintainable to be anywhere near that body fat level, and it's not at all. So that is also what I tell my clients. I say, look, I can make you lose 10 kilos in a month. You'll feel terrible and you'll probably put it back on. Or it takes a little bit longer. You develop more habits as you do it. You get stronger in the process. Why would you not want to get stronger? And you can actually keep it with you for the rest of your life. You're, let's say, 35. You want to do this until you're 80. So that's what, another 45 years. 45 years. Yeah. That's another 45 years. Losing this, let's say 20 kilos that you want to do. What difference would it be if you lost 20 kilos over, you want to do it in 3 months, which good luck with that, but you want to do it in 3 months? Or what if you lose it over a year? What if you lose it over 2? You do it a lot more steady, because our bodies also really don't like change, let alone dramatic change. It doesn't like to bulk, it doesn't like to cut. It sucks. That's why you feel, for example, very sluggish and very brain foggy if you're in a bulk, let alone a big bulk. That's why you feel tired and lethargic and cold and low libido if you're in a cut, let alone a big cut. That's why you got to do it in a smart way. So yeah, we have to manage their expectations 100%.
And also with body dysmorphia as well, or looking in the mirror, seeing a certain image and not being happy with it, that's strongly associated with coming across these Instagram influencers or leading figures in fitness who are chemically enhanced, right? That's probably a bigger issue with men, because obviously we see our bodies and we compare them to some of our idols who may or may not be natural. That eternal question, natty or not. You see a physique that has a lot of muscle on it and sub 10% body fat. Is it natty or not? Mm-hmm. So I've got a revolutionary idea to that. People on their Instagram account who have a certain amount of followers, obviously they list their achievements, this many times placed in the top 3, blah, 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 blah. Put their current stack in there as well. Mm-hmm. Be honest about it. This is what I'm using. I'm using X milligrams of this, that, and that compound to have this physique. That would be a lot more honest. Obviously, for legal reasons and unfortunately for moral reasons as well, they do not do that. But it would be, I think, ethical, right?
For legal and for business reasons,
and for business reasons as well.
Capitalize on it a lot. So in the Instagram, instead of pronouns in that section, just put your current stack, and then
just put if you have one
more. Yeah.
If not, you don't have one. Obviously, you can put natural, lifetime natty, natty for the past 5 years. But just be more honest as a human being. Is that too much to ask?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to get, unfortunately.
Of course, it's not going to happen.
No,
I still have that idea, you know.
It would be a nice idea, and it would be a nice idea maybe if they would somehow. It's tricky to say, because I would think, what if there was an incentive for them to be honest? But what's a bigger incentive than money? And they get paid more if they lie about it anyway. So yeah, if anyone figures out a good incentive to make people want to be honest, that would be great. The second question I had 10 minutes ago, you said that you tried Olympic weightlifting, but you just weren't built for it. So there's, I'm sure you know about it, but they don't, something called the swimmer's body illusion, where people will look at someone who does a sport and they conflate the selection criteria for doing it with the results they get. So they will think, oh, this guy's a swimmer, he looks great, I'm gonna start swimming. This guy's a rugby player, his thighs are huge, I'm gonna do it. Whereas in reality, they didn't get that way because of what they do. They do what they do because they were that way. A lot of PTs are not in shape because they're PTs. They are PTs because they are in shape, which comes with its own problems, but that's a separate story. How much of a factor do you think that plays into people's perceptions of body image? This swimmer's body effect, where they think this person does this and looks like that, it must be because they do that, as opposed to the other way around.
I definitely think that you lean towards doing things that you're naturally good at, because then if you're good at something, you might as well do it a little bit, because obviously you get that feedback from your environment. I thought, Alex, you're very good at this, you should do a little bit more. Who on this planet doesn't like receiving praises and saying, "Dude, good, you're very good, you well done, you won this competition, you should do more of that." So I agree with what you said. Most people who are very good in a given sport, the sport selected them rather than they selecting the sport that they do. In my personal experience as well, I started playing football. I was very good at it. So that's why I really liked football as well, because I was better than most of the other kids. Then when I started playing basketball, my hand-eye coordination was great. Obviously, I was great on the ball, but because of limitations within my height, I mean, if you look at me, I'm not. You can already say, like, I mean, Andor, why were you a basketball player? So that sport did not select me. That didn't matter how much I liked the actual sport. So that's the same with Olympic weightlifting as well. If you want to be an Olympic weightlifter, you want to be a good one, you need a certain body type. You ideally want a longer torso, shorter legs, and shorter arms, so shorter limbs, and that, for specific reasons, allows you to lift a bigger weight overhead, whether it's clean and jerk or snatch. I'm not built like that, right? So for me, the amount of effort that I need to put in order to progress or get to a certain level, it was the one that I said that it's not worth it for me. Maybe other people with also like not great genetics for a certain sport love that sport as much that their answer to the same question is, oh, it's still worth it because I love it so much. And we've all met people like that, right? And then sometimes you laugh at them, this is a bit delusional, that guy, but they love it. So, so be it. Chase that ideal, do that sport, nothing wrong with it. But you have to accept that you're not going to be exceptional at that sport. But it does depend on your environment as well. Like you mentioned that in a certain gym, you belong to, the cream de la cream, top 1%. And then you go to like a big fish in a little, fish tank. And then you being dropped in a pond. And it's like suddenly, oh my God, that guy is, look at the size of that guy. Look at the strength of the other one. What is that doing? Oh my God, weighted muscle ups, whatever that might be. See, so it depends on the perspective, on the situation that you're in.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's still the exception of the person who simply just wants it the most and they just get past all the obstacles in their way? So I don't know what his name was, but world's strongest man at some point in the last 3-5 years, he was like 5'11". The height obviously plays a massive component in strongman stuff because it affects how big you physically are, it affects your maximum, whatever you can put on your frame. So it's these exceptions people that... Do you think you can be the best even if all the disadvantages are there?
I think it's a combination of things.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have that genetic potential to be very good in that given task.
Mm-hmm.
I think you referred to Eddie Hall. He's a British strongman powerlifter from Hull, I believe. And yes, for the average strongest man on this planet, he is short. He doesn't look, because usually they are tall and huge, like the Icelandic strongman Thor or other previous world's strongest man as well. And he didn't particularly look the part. However, he achieved that goal. He worked really hard to get in there as well, and despite his weaknesses, he still got there, which is obviously, that's due to his work ethic, but also he did have that genetic potential, the extra gear that he had in the tank to go all the way.
But I suppose then the question is, could you ever know?
So basically your question was that despite some disadvantages genetically, can you still get there? Under very special circumstances, you can. But it's rare.
It is.
But it's rare. That's what I would say.
It is rare. And I think you also need, no matter how talented you are, without that delusion of thinking you will be the best, you never will be, because then you won't find out if you can overcome all the disadvantages you have. So the example I can have for myself personally, I'm not the world best, I'm not anything special at all, but with dance, for example, I started off, I had 2 left feet, I couldn't even hear rhythm, I didn't know what tempo was, like I didn't know anything, and it took me a good 3 months just to dance on the right beat. Now, because I got past that initial block, I had the disadvantages. The advantages I can think of that I had were, I suppose, I was healthy. I had 2 legs. You don't really need mobility for it. I suppose in my DNA somewhere, I've got traditional Georgian dancing to some degree. But physically speaking, I don't think I had more advantages than disadvantages, but I just wanted it enough that I learned how to move my body a lot better. I learned how to hear the music, a lot of which comes very naturally to people. And do I think I could be the world's best? Maybe I am delusional, but if I tried, I think I could be up there.
Really?
If I made it my life's goal, if I stopped PTing and I tried to become a dancer, there is a small part of me that has that delusion. I think I could be up there with enough training.
But is it that psychological delusion that drives you forward though? Like in reality?
No, it's not.
You see what I mean?
It's not, because I don't want to become the world's best. I'm always tiptoeing around this.
But in your head, you have the thought that if you really wanted to be one of the best dancers in the world within that dance, if you sacrificed everything else in your life, you could be up there.
I think I could. But the thing that drives me forward is, without all of that sacrifice, what I'm currently able to do with my free time or resources, whatever, I can still be I can be very good. Maybe great, it depends what standard you're using, but I know at the very least I can be a lot better than I already am, and then that's it. Like with this particular dancing, there's essentially 4 routes you can take once you start it. You can keep doing and keep being what's called a social dancer. You go, you just have fun, that's it. To me, that's a bit of a waste. You can then either teach, perform, or compete. Competing, I don't want to, because I don't agree with how the competitions are run. And with something like this, you don't need to compete to prove you're the best, I think, unless you're like the top 2%. Performing, I'm not much of a performer. I don't like that kind of attention on me, so that's a no. But teaching is definitely where I'm at. Either of these 3 allow you something tangible and concrete to work towards. So the better dancer I become, the better teacher I become, and then that is what I have to show for it. So the thing that keeps me driving forward is I love it very much, but so that I don't feel like it's a waste, I had to go through one of these 3. Some people just really like it, they stay social dancing for the rest of their life. Fine, that's cool. But because of my background as a trainer and all of the various martial arts I used to coach and whatever, I have the ability to teach already. Now it's just the content of what I'm teaching. So to answer your question, I do have that delusion, I think. It's really small, and I feel silly saying it out loud, but I genuinely think if I did, I would. Then the reason is, why don't I do it? Because I don't think I would enjoy it anymore. And that is ultimately what dancing is to me. I don't want it to be, I'm not in it for the money. I'm not in it for fame. I don't want fame. I don't want it to be where my money comes from, because then it becomes work, because then the joy of it comes out. I don't get to do everything on my terms. As a PT, I'm fine with this for now being my job. I know I'm good at it. I know there is pressure that comes from it. I know I won't enjoy the gym always. I'm fine with that. But dance is like my special baby. So I don't, if I gave into that delusion, I would sacrifice a big joy of why I do it.
But also, like, in terms of how talented or how genetically potent somebody is for a given task, I think we have to look at it as it's a scale, say 1 to 10. So maybe you're not the most talented in the world. However,
I could work for it.
You might be actually, I don't know, 6 or 7 out of 10 to begin with. And it's how quickly you react to that stimulus as well. Obviously, using terminology from resistance training, but it's how quickly you learn, how quickly you adapt to that thing, and how much you practice. So there's, I think it's still a combination of things. You need to assess it globally. Like it's a combination of everything that you have and that you're willing to do in order to get wherever you want to get. And if you luck, and it needs to be a certain amount of luck as well.
Yeah.
Because come up against other competitors. And if somebody who's more talented, more genetically better than you, and they are willing to do what you do, they're going to beat you. That's what we saw, for example, in football in the last 15, 20 years as well, in my opinion. The two most outstanding football players of the last 2 decades are, even if you're not into football, you know, it's Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. One is known for his extreme work ethic, and he's probably in that scale 1 to 10, 8 in terms of talent, maybe 9. That's Cristiano Ronaldo, extremely talented football player, and he's legendary in terms of work ethic and ego as well. Lionel Messi, he works enough. He obviously eats well. He takes care of his body. In terms of talent, he's 10 out of 10. Now, obviously, there's an ongoing debate on who is actually the better player. But at this point, I would say probably 8 out of 10 people would say Lionel Messi beats Ronaldo. So if the talented player works close to as much as the less talented one, they still gonna come out on top. That's just one example, and it's subjective as well. Some people might say Cristiano Ronaldo is better. However, this is how I see things working in terms of competitive sports.
I completely agree. And I think the difficulty with football is because it's such a big team sport, there are so many moving elements. It's hard to isolate and judge the merit of one individual player, but you can, it's just harder. The example that comes to mind is John Jones in MMA. Freak of talent, treats his body like trash, don't even know if he does the bare minimum, but he was dominating people. Coke on the weekends, probably hookers, drinking all the time. He even said once, I think, he would either drink or do drugs before a lot of his fights. Even though he won quite easily, he did it so that he would have an excuse in case he lost. So he is a prime example of wasted talent, but he had so much talent that it still got him essentially one of the best fighters ever. But then you have the whole like performance enhancing drugs and how good would he have been without them? But even without them, he was a freak of nature. So 100%, if all else is equated, the difference of talent will make the difference. But I think you should only look at that once everything is over. If I'm competing if I'm in a fight, if I'm gonna fight someone, in the build up to the fight, during the fight, I cannot afford, and I shouldn't, I don't think about talent at all. He's more talented than me, I'm more talented, whatever. The most important thing is, have I done all the work I can? Then once it's all over, you can't change the past. You think, okay, I did everything I could. Literally, he was just better. So, yeah.
And that's the beauty of it as well. All else is never equated.
Yeah.
Only in theory.
Yeah.
So the outcome depends on so many factors that you can never put into numbers. So you can't really calculate why certain competitor came out on top, and to what percentages things added up to where he placed or the other competitor placed in whatever sports we're talking about.
I think it was George St. Pierre, GSP, I think he's the one that said there is no such thing as the best fighter ever or all time, whatever. There is just, he is the best right now. Because especially when you're competing at such a high level, it's the small things that make a difference. It's a game of inches. So for whatever reason, maybe like some sort of butterfly effect where a police siren set off something in the night, even more than, someone forgot to turn off an appliance in an office building. They went home, a fire started, massive police brigade going through fire brigade going through residential areas to try and stop it, wakes up the fighter in the middle of the night, sleep is interrupted, cascade of events happen, and then that is the small edge that made them not win the fight. So, yeah, it's hard to say who is the best, but then you have people that just dominate.
But that's the beauty of life, isn't it? That's the spice of life, the unpredictability.
Yeah,
you can't like if it was so boring if you could predict the outcome all the time when it gets to anything. And then what's the point? What's the point of living? It's just meaningless.
It is. That's why when when they introduced Superman as a fictional character, he didn't have any weaknesses, I don't think, or it was while they were planning it. At some point, the character of Superman had 0 weaknesses. He was basically God. There's nothing interesting about it. But the minute you introduce kryptonite, he's not invulnerable. There is something that limits him. There's this anime called One Punch Man, where the guy is just the strongest being in the universe. Are you familiar with it? Or have you been called it? Because you've got like the Saitama look.
I never really got involved in the manga universe, so I sort of pseudo familiar with it.
You're very much like you're like a bearded One Punch Man, because he's hench, he's bold. The whole point of the anime is that he's bored. He is constantly on a quest to find something or someone stronger than him. The minute there's that potential, he gets excited, then he just destroys them, and he's like, well, that was pointless, that was boring. So yeah, I think it's because you don't usually have this landslide of a thing that makes the spice of life spicy. Going more towards fitness side of things again, what is bro science, and what is the difference between that and real science?
So trying to put into words what bro science might be, I guess it's methods, training methods, and specific ways of getting big and strong, which is not based on evidence, but what you've heard from other people who are older, bigger than you, and what you just information that's gathered by experience, that sort of stuff. So it's not necessarily something that's backed up by studies and research, but it's something that's based on other sources of information.
Mm-hmm. Are there any notorious or defining examples, concrete examples of, oh, this is bro science, don't worry about it? So the example that comes to mind for me is this idea that they used to have, that some people still do on lat pull downs, which is the wider your grip is, the more your lats are engaged. I don't know what that's based on. It must have been some gym bro who just said it sometime.
I believe that specific example must be based on the fact that if you go on a closer grip, you will have more elbow flexion as you pull down, so therefore the bicep will work more, and possibly the forearms as well. However, since they've done studies on different width of grip on the pull downs, they conclude that it doesn't really matter. The lats will probably work roughly the same amount. So usually I recommend to people that ask me about width on the lat pull down or certain grips, whether it's underhand, overhand, neutral, go with whichever feels the best for you. There's not a huge difference there. But that's just my opinion. But probably that's how that, because bro science is always based on something that at the time for the person or for that community seemed logical or felt logical. And sometimes they are actually right. Sometimes they are or were instinctively right. And then sometimes it's obviously, it doesn't reflect the reality. But for example, now there's a big buzz in the industry about long length partials. You go back 30, 40, 50 years, you have a look at some training footage of the bodybuilders at the time, and some actually train that bottom half. They would do like an incline dumbbell press, and they would do this. And you look at it and you're like, what the hell is he doing? Turns out he was doing long length partials. Did he know that it was just as efficient as full range of motion? No. But he instinctively did it. The athlete I'm referring to is Sergio Oliva, who was at the time one of the top bodybuilders. So sometimes you can come to conclusions based on your own experience on how, but you need extremely good mind-body connection, and you need to really connect to that sport that you're doing with the act and process of lifting weights. Is it backed by science? No. But sometimes science reassures bro science, like, okay, you were right. And sometimes it goes, well, actually, it turns out that it's not necessarily true.
Yeah. There is a underappreciated value of instinct, I think, in general with everything. So we might think if we do a certain exercise that if someone comes to us, a client who's new to exercise, we know, okay, they don't have good mind-body connection. Okay, we're the trainer, we know better, whatever. And they'll do an exercise and all they have, it just doesn't feel right. And we might try and poke and prod and change some things, but ultimately they say, you know what, it still just doesn't feel right. They could be right. They could be true. So let's say before we even knew how to squat properly all the way down, arse to grass, whatever, some people just don't have the mobility for it. Some of my clients, their ankles, their shins can just move that. That's about it. Whereas arse to grass, you need all the way here. So before we even maybe knew about what ankle mobility is, we might try and force them into it. Like, no, you have to do it. But it just doesn't feel right because this is what it is. An example that comes to mind is this idea of, not fitness related, but grounding yourself in the earth. What is that? You go stand on grass barefoot. Sounds weird. Sounds like some old mumbo jumbo your grandparents would say. But now it's like, okay, so apparently we physically connect with certain electrons that are in the ground and it changes whatever in our body. Like, science can very much back it up. But then you've got to learn how to distinguish between the actual nonsense. What my parents used to tell me was, if I put my coat on before I go outside, I will be colder than if I put it on when I'm outside, which I don't really think makes sense. So then that leads on to the question, how can beginners distinguish between what is legit and what is not? Who is reputable, who knows their stuff versus who doesn't?
Probably the hardest question so far to answer, isn't it? Because obviously we come from a completely different background. We've been doing this for a long time. We probably do a lot better job than beginners to separate people who are legit from people who are scammers or more likely not telling us the best methods to achieve our goals. A funny thing about fitness or getting results within fitness is if you live a sedentary lifestyle, you don't do any exercise at the moment. You just sitting at home watching Netflix. You don't focus on your diet, and you make a decision to go to gym or do some form of exercise. Sadly, I would say it doesn't even matter what method you start using. To a certain extent, it will work because you will do an activity that you haven't done before.
You'll do something.
So you can get away with doing some questionable things and you still see results. And that's the catch-22. That's why you see some people stuck within that thing, and you look at them in the gym like, what are you doing? You talk to them and they do it because it worked. It's like, why would I change it? It's been working for me. Of course it does, because beforehand you did absolutely nothing. If I get a complete newbie in the gym and I tell him to do absolute nonsense, they would still probably progress a little bit. And that's the sad reality. Could it be more optimal? Could they progress more? Of course they could. What's your answer to that? I don't know. I can't answer that question. Like, how do beginners say? I mean, I think best chance is we just hope that they bump into somebody who's a legit force to tell them what to do and how to get started and how to learn the foundations and fundamentals of training and diet.
Mm-hmm. It's a tricky one because the answer that comes to mind, also just as a side note, I agree, because even the bare minimum is enough to make a change. That's almost a testament to how shit of a trainer you must be even if what you do is wrong, you still can't get any results in your clients, even minimal. Then something is completely off. The fact that even though everything you teach them and make them do is wrong, even though everything is questionable, it doesn't even hit that very low threshold to make any change. So that's just a side point. But the answer to the question, I think, unfortunately, I think you get two types of people. three types. You have a few different categories. You have people who want to understand why they do what they do. Then you have people who don't. Then you have people who have the time to understand and people who don't. My favorite thing is to turn my clients into mini-me's and adopt my training knowledge and philosophy on whatever their goal is. But I also know some of my clients work very long hours. They have busy corporate jobs. They don't have the brain space, the capacity, the effort, or even the time to learn all this stuff. So that's where I come in. They outsource that knowledge to me, because fundamentally that is why we're there. It's, I think, a privilege to be able to educate your client as well as give them the results they want. Some people don't care about what it is, so then they just get lucky, whether they get someone who's legit, someone who, I don't know, wants to give them explosive abs, or someone who is actually about their stuff. And then, so you either luck out or you don't. And then you have the people who want to understand, so even if they get a bad trainer, eventually they will clock on and think, something here doesn't add up. Like if I'm learning a new discipline, for example, if I get into, let's say some new trainings, if I get into Olympic weightlifting, I don't know much about, that's not a good example. If I get into, I just know so much. If I get into something that I don't know anything about, I will want to understand it. I have that knowledge, that drive to want to know. So even if I get someone who's crap, I might believe them in the beginning because I don't know anything. But then the pieces start to connect. I think, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. So when I was learning to dance in the very beginning, I knew nothing. But one of my first teachers at the time, certain things he would say eventually wouldn't make sense to me. But then I think, oh, he's the teacher, he knows better. But then enough time passes, I think, no, but this still doesn't make sense. And something just doesn't click. So to answer the question...
Basically, there's a certain element of luck in there. Whether you bump into a legit source of information straight away and then... Good, well done. Go along that path. If you're not as lucky and your first exposure to getting fit is, for example, Joe Wicks, then probably you should search a little bit further or dwell into this specific subject a little bit deeper. Which, to be fair, you, regardless fitness, with anything in life that you're interested in my opinion, you should do to a certain extent if you want great results. So maybe that's the solution. Like, you accept that the first thing that you try is not going to be the best, but you just have to dig a little bit deeper and then a little bit deeper if you're passionate about it enough and if you really want to get better at it.
Yeah, you should forget about wanting the best. You just need good enough, and then it gets to a point where it doesn't serve you anymore, maybe because it's not that good, so you need the next thing. The unfortunate ones are simply the ones who don't really want to understand, and they get paired with someone who doesn't know. But then I suppose inevitably you'll realize they're not legit because they're not giving you the results. But then that raises the question, which I think is yes. The question is, should everyone want to understand their body and how it works? Yes, I think they should. Whether everyone is afforded the time or can they make the time? Sometimes life gets in the way, sometimes you can't even if you want to, but at the very least I think everyone should want to understand and see what their body is capable of.
And also obviously the big problem is that there's no one good way and everything and all the other ways are wrong. There are multiple good ways to getting fit, whatever that might mean for you. Yes, you can get fit doing CrossFit. Yes, you can get fit doing yoga. Yes, you can get fit doing bodybuilding. Yes, you can get fit doing kettlebell training. It depends on your definition of fitness, what it means to you, and you can get results within that certain area. Whether it's right or wrong for you, you're not in a position to analyze it just yet. I think probably the solution is just getting started. Stop procrastinating and just get started with something. And then you will be in that position where you can analyze things and maybe figure out that this is not the right way for me, or I should put this and that together, or maybe add a little bit of that, or try multiple things, and then you then you decide which path to walk.
Because if fundamentally that is all about just you gathering more data so you can understand what's best, because then that avoids that trap that I'm sure you've fallen into sometimes before. Maybe I know I have, of perfect inaction versus imperfect action. Imperfect action is always going to triumph because it doesn't. Saw some clip from Chris Williamson. It was like, planning to do the thing isn't doing the thing. Telling your friends about the thing is not going to do the thing. Thinking about what happens when you do the thing is not doing the thing. Like, all of these things is not doing it. So yes, you need enough of a plan, but that's all you need. You need enough. You need just enough. So then I suppose it gets into a different topic, but yeah, you simply don't know enough to make an informed decision. So embrace being an idiot, because you need to put your pride to the side. You need to accept, I'm stupid. I need to be stupid in order to be smart. So no matter what new thing I do, I need to humble myself. And that's the cool thing when you're high level in something and then you start something else. You're not starting from scratch by any means. You are starting with a framework that allowed you to be the best in something, and then you can do it in whatever this new thing is. In the same way, if you apply principles of training in the gym to life, you will be better at it. But if you don't have anything going for you, you won't be able to know where to start. So at the very least, if nothing in life is going well, try and start with what your body is like, because then you learn things along the way.
Because the trick is that admitting to yourself that you're stupid, that you don't know anything about it, you're so bad at it, you suck, is very hard. The amount of self-awareness and humbleness you need to admit that, that's a tough pill to take.
It's not a common thing, and that links back to when people say you're perfect the way you are. No, you're not. To admit you're stupid is a good thing. Yeah, it hurts because
let's say it's true. You are perfect the way you are. Why should you ever get up from this chair? Why should you ever do anything in your life? You're just perfect the way you are, Alex. You're beautiful. Your beard couldn't be more beautiful. You've got
Yeah, there's no reason to do anything.
The ultimate end product of the universe. You are perfect the way you are. So obviously, I think everyone knows deep inside that it is a lie. Obviously, we could start a conversation on the nature of perfection in itself as well. What does it mean? Like it literally means that you cannot be any better than you are already. Is that true? Do you think anyone believes that it's fundamentally true?
No. Deep down, I don't think anyone is. As dumb as people are, I don't think anyone is that dumb, because the reason I think that is because our emotions tell us something. So when you talk about perfection, people usually try and this like new perfect movement. It's not a thing, but let's just call it the perfect movement. What we were talking about before, like, no, sis, you're beautiful, you're perfect the way you are. The reason why they're so emotionally charged when they say it is because they know deep down it's not true. But to say you're not perfect is a good thing. To say I'm stupid is a good thing, because that means I have that much more to progress. The conflation that they make is that perfect is a state of being as opposed to a way of living. I don't know who said it, but it's like, excellence isn't something you achieve. A good body isn't something you just achieve. It's something you maintain. To be a patient man, it's not something I am, it's something I practice. All of these things that we want to be, you're not being them in terms of being the noun, you're being them as in being the verb, you're doing it. So if I want to be kind, okay, I'm a kind person, I've given 5 billion pounds to charity, I'm kind, I've achieved it now, I don't need to do it ever again. Old granny crossing the street fell down, I'm kind, it's okay. No. So even if I get the body I want, then what? If I do nothing? I start this new discipline of a dance. I had an amazing body, but I have a good body. I'm perfect. I don't need to do this. Well, now you're not excellent anymore. So to answer your question, I don't think anyone is that silly deep down because of how objective driven we are as humans. I don't think no matter how sophisticated or crossed your wiring is, for whatever reason in your brain, fundamentally we all want to improve things. Some people are just more receptive to that idea. Some people just realize it and they're more, for lack of a less cringy term, more in touch with their humanity, like literally. But no, perfection is a myth. It doesn't exist.
And also there's a huge contradiction there as well within our industry, people being told that, oh, you're perfect the way you are. Why should they train with you then?
I would never say that.
Why should they buy your method? Why should they pay money to anyone telling them how to get better if they are already perfect?
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't get it.
Yeah. No. I can't think of a single example. And now I'm actually thinking in other areas of life when I have used the word perfect for something. And I suppose it's a tangent again, but the only time where maybe you could say it is maybe if you're describing some kind of art, that it's perfect. It doesn't mean it's... Because perfect does not mean flawless.
But also that piece of art or that piece of object is perfect for you, accepting its flaws. My favorite films, my favorite paintings, my favorite books are not fucking perfect.
Yep.
I love them, and for me, they give something authentic that became the part of me, but they are not flawless. Mm-hmm. But I love them even more for their flaws.
Mm-hmm.
So that person as well, for example, apart from art or objects, probably one very specific time in your life when you think a person is perfect, when you fall in love the first time, and that person is perfect. Are they really perfect? They don't have a spot on their back, or they probably not perfect, but for you they are perfect with their flaws. That you want that person the way she is, he is, because they are just, that's the,
yeah,
that's perfect for you.
Yeah, perfect is definitely an individual thing, and
maybe we should just redefine
what perfect means.
The perfection,
and
just put different definition into the vocabularies.
I think if we go by that frame, everyone is perfect, but it does not mean that they are flawless. But then it's tricky because you're implying that it's a bad thing that you have. So for example, if I say I'm perfect, but I could be more patient, that implies the level of patience I'm at is bad. But then you get into that point of, okay, I want to be more patient, but then I might think I never reached that goal. But then is it about reaching it or just being more patient than I was compared to when I started it? So I think the minute you get into the world of using the word perfect, you've lost, because it just makes everything tricky.
And also my question is, that person who tells their audience that, don't worry, just accept yourself, you are perfect. Do they think that they are perfect? Who's that person? Who's that living creature who thinks that I am perfect? I'm pretty sure that he or she must be a sociopath or a psychopath. Mm-hmm. Apart from, correct me if I'm wrong, was there a period of life when you thought you were perfect?
Oh yeah.
I never made.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was wrong. I was stupid.
Yes.
But I had that period. Yeah.
How did that Please lead me through that process of thinking that you were perfect at the time. Because that never happened to me.
It's one of those things where the minute you poke a hole in it, it crumbles down. I just had a very short period where, because of whatever reason, it's a defense mechanism to protect yourself from all the bad feelings you initially get from realizing you're not perfect. It wasn't, we've all been through different periods of our life. I went through that phase, but I can say wholeheartedly it's a stupid phase to go through. But for me, it was necessary to have it to then realize it's stupid and then get on with it. No one's perfect at all. I had that phase. It lasted a very short amount of time, and it was born out of ignorance, arrogance, and fear of looking at myself, I suppose.
Interesting.
Yes.
Not once in my lifetime I felt that I was perfect. On my better days, I feel that I'm good enough. Mm-hmm. And I think that's that. On my worst days, yeah,
goes to a different place.
It can be a very dark place where you think you're just a clumsy clown that can be exposed at any moment, and people look at you and they just see your bare existence, and they just laugh at you for who you are. And obviously that's probably not a reasonable take on yourself neither, but that's how you feel about yourself. And then on your better days, you feel like, I'm certainly good enough. I can cope with existence, and I can cope with the tasks ahead, whether it's related to sport, private life, family matter. Like, yeah, so I got this. I can do it, but I can't do it to perfection. That doesn't exist for me. It doesn't exist.
I don't think it exists for anyone deep down. And I think maybe the reason why I went through it is it could be just a generational thing, because you grew up in Hungary, or?
So I was born in Romania, and when I was 6, we moved to Hungary. So I was born to the Hungarian minority of Romania.
Okay. So you grew up in a very different setting compared to what I did in like the peak of the 2000s in London. I am part of the generation, and a little bit, not as much as Gen Z. I don't know if I'm Gen Z or millennial, but whatever. I was surrounded by a lot more of this idea of you are perfect and blah, blah, blah. So that could just be the reason why I went through that phase, and why a lot of people my age, slightly older, definitely younger, are going through that phase of adopting this mentality of ego and pride. Like, yeah, I'm perfect, everything's beneath me, blah, blah, blah. It's this ongoing joke online where so many people have a combination of God complex, but significantly looking down upon themselves as well. It's a really funny balance to see, and the jokes that come out of it hilarious, because I can relate to it quite a lot.
But it's probably more to do with the fact that although you were born in Georgia, but you grew up in England, so you grew up in Western Europe.
Yeah.
So that's Western values, and that is coming from the United States, where kids,
a lot of nonsense happening.
It's all stereotypical, but they brought up being told that they are the best. They get medals even if they don't win, even if
trophies,
even if they come last.
Yep.
In Eastern Europe, especially at the time when I was born, I grew up, this was not a thing. It was,
you have to be the best.
It wasn't bad, but it was a different way of bringing up children, or different values that were communicated to them.
Yeah, I talk with my mum about this, because she's like early 50s somewhere. So she was born in 71 and grew up in Soviet era Georgia. I always talk with her about this. She keeps telling me, like, Alex, you need to understand, we did not grow up thinking about me or I or critical thinking or any of this. It was just excellence. You need to succeed. You need results, which is obviously the complete opposite of what the Western values are. It's just, no, you tried, that's good enough. Like, no, you're perfect. And you could argue that the culture then in that part of the world at that time was the extreme of one end, because my mother will admit one of her biggest things that she just can't do is admit she's wrong. Even though objectively she knows sometimes she's probably wrong, she will never admit it. And that is because of upbringing, because of everything. So it could be because of that one extreme we had. Now we've just gone to the complete other extreme. I would say I hope we find an equilibrium and get in the middle, but I think it's just getting worse. So before we get there, it's going to keep going downhill. Unfortunately, that's what I think.
Yeah, it definitely plays a huge part. I mean, since I have kids, and obviously since I've been trying to deal with my experiences throughout childhood and what traumas I encountered, I got into psychology, and transgenerational trauma is sort of a big thing right now.
Very much so.
In psychology, right? So there's 2 ways to deal with traumas that you encountered throughout your childhood. 1, you make the same mistakes and the shit rolls on to the next generation. 2, you're so afraid of making those same mistakes, you go to the complete opposite.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to stay ideally, in my opinion, you should find a balance between the 2. In reality, it's almost impossible, unfortunately. parenthood is one thing that from the outside it looks like it's, I mean, surely evolution sorted that out, you know, in tens of thousands of years. Like, you just nice, just, you know, you keep them alive and then they just thrive.
No.
Well.
No.
I personally find it the most challenging thing that I'm ever going to do in life. But I set that barrier for myself at just doing a good enough job. I know that I can't do a perfect job. And sometimes I feel that I'm not even doing a good enough job. And I think that's how parents feel these days about bringing up kids.
I think parenthood, obviously I'm not one, I hope, and I'm not one. I know that from what I can see, parenthood is one of the hardest things, if not the hardest thing ever, because in some way your child will inherit some kind of messed up thing from you. You just choose, I suppose, you do your best to do the lesser of two evils. Do you continue the cycle of what your parents had to you and whatnot, or do you want to break it? And then maybe you just start a slightly smaller cycle, something that's not as intense. So I know with my dad, for example, his dad passed away when he was quite like teenager age. But a lot of the time I talk with him about it, and I know a big reason why he is the way he is with me is because it's the opposite or not what he got from his dad. So that is like, it's an overused phrase of breaking the cycle, but he's literally breaking the generational trauma cycle. What I think would be interesting to know is, if you're okay to share it.
Yep.
On the outside, to me, you're strong, you're well-spoken, you're intelligent, you have a family, you have stability, all of these things that I would think make you a respectable man in your community, in your family, whatnot. When you have those bad days where you get in your head and you have just the worst image of yourself, what is it, who is it that you see of yourself when you have those bad days? What's the description of yourself that you just can't shake the feeling of, that you just want to not be?
So the interesting thing is that that's how, when people look at me, some people look at me, maybe that's what they see. The ultimate question is, who are you? Are you what people think of you, what you think of yourself? Mm-hmm. Are you who you seem to be at a certain period of time? When you look strong physically, mentally, or when you're weak and clumsy and you trip or slip on a banana? Well, probably not in an actual banana, but you see what I mean. So who are, I think you, all of these things, you are strong, but you have weaknesses as well. So again, just a melting pot of lots of things. And on your weaker days, when shit hits the fans, it's just too overwhelming, and you're still swimming in that shit, doing your best, but you think that because of the circumstances that are presented at that given point, you cannot cope with it to a good enough degree. Doesn't mean that you give up. You're still doing your best, but your weaknesses as a person are highlighted and your strengths are just pushed down. I don't know how much sense that makes.
It makes sense.
But we all combinations of things. If you ever try to analyze yourself, even if you were inaccurate, you know that you've got certain things that you're good at. Okay, whatever they might be, and certain other things, hopefully you're aware that you're not very good at this, and this. And I would say on those days, or when those situations present themselves, I feel like I just can't push my weaknesses down, and my strengths are just there. I can't bring them up. So that Andor, that is not very strong and not good at certain things, he is just getting bigger. And the one that's also inside me at that point, and that is strong and capable of dealing with this certain situation, he cannot grow up.
When you have those bad days, what are the weaknesses that are highlighted? Because I'm sure this image that people have of you most likely does not coincide with what you think of yourself on those bad days. But what is it that you think to yourself when it's all just highlighted and your strengths are minimized?
Well, I'm still searching for the ultimate method of dealing with this. One form of physical meditation that I do is training, is exercising. For me, that's, as I probably mentioned before, that's physical therapy. That's one of the reasons why I lift weights, why I got into physical training, to deal with these demons and physically enact on them, and I feel a little bit better about my existence on this planet. And that always helped me, even during the most difficult times of my life. Whatever happened at that time, I probably just pushed training a little harder, whether or not that was a smart thing to do, but it helped me to get rid of those demons, or at least defeat those demons for a short period of time. And you just feel a little bit better. We all know that feeling. Anyone who ever did sports and enjoyed doing that given sport knows what I'm talking about right now. It is a form of therapy. It's not just there to be stronger, to look better, but it's just a way of finding meaning on this planet. Even if it's just for the time being, and until during getting into that flow, but you are saved. And then that shit comes back at you, sure, but at least you can hopefully deal with it just a little bit better. You have more tolerance. So that's my way of coping with it. It is a form of addiction. People are addicted to substances. We don't necessarily associate addiction with being addicted to physical exercise, but in my opinion, it can be a form of addiction. And I'm pretty sure that most people within the fitness industry are addicted to it. And that's why it's a bit unfair to talk to our audience from this position, selling things that we do as health and fitness wise. We are addicted to it. We cannot not do it. And we sell it as, this is the way, you need to be fit, you need to be strong. Yes, you're addicted to this shit, of course you're doing it. I can't not train, I need to do it. I have the urge to physically enact on my demons, on my life. And they don't. They have probably other forms of addictions. They might drink the pint of lager. They might be addicted to cigarettes, to caffeine. And that's obviously the milder forms of addiction. There's a lot worse out there as well. So they are not in a position, for them, this is a hard job to get into physical fitness. Whereas this is how we deal with our lives.
The clients that I don't like to work with personally are the ones where I need to convince them why they should be doing any of this in the first place. The ones I like are the ones that think, the ones that realize there is value in this. My life will be better if I try and get fitter. How do I do it? That's when I come in. But if you're talking like general conversation, if someone says, oh, what's the point of getting fit? I can give you many reasons why. But the reason why you think that is probably because your life has not gotten to a bad enough point where you see the value of it now. That's a tangent. With those demons that you learn how to fight, it's very much sometimes an addiction, sometimes a coping mechanism, whatever it is. I know that on my bad days, for whatever reason, whatever happens, whatever triggers it, the voices, the angry part of me, or the negative part of me, the dark part of me, what it keeps telling me and how it sees me is that weak, haven't accomplished anything of significance, don't treat your friends and family properly, selfish, impatient, lazy. Those are the things that it tells me. Are there any specific things that it tells you? Like your dark part?
I think we associate these words like weak is bad and strong is good. So sometimes I think again, sometimes the quintessential truth is somewhere in the middle. Like strong is not always good, weak is not always bad. Sometimes it's good to be weak. Sometimes you don't have to be as strong. So just maybe the solution on the long run is allow yourself to be in the middle, and that's what I'm trying to condition myself towards. That's why I'm close to Buddhism. I'm not Buddhist, but I'd like to live a life where that middle path, that middle way is more present in my life. Probably because I'm not as good at it as I want to be, but that's what I'm trying to aim for. So not being weak, not being strong, but just flow through in the middle and be overall more authentically me, whatever that means. Obviously that's why you're here, to figure that out. And not try not to be somebody else, right? And operate in this society in a way that ideally you don't hurt others, but you don't have to compromise who you are just because you are observed by others, and you don't feel the need to act a certain way because that's what your surroundings sort of accept. Well, that's what they want from you. Especially in an environment where we operate, gyms, health clubs, there are lots of people there. You can just put on a mask and act the whole day. That's not what I like to do. That's not what I do. That's not what I've known for. However, sometimes from the outside, people can look at you and they just think that you just locked into your own world, or maybe they expect you to act a certain way, and if you're not that sort of high energy, hey, how you doing, all the time, then it's like, what's wrong with that guy? Why is he not saying hello? Why is he not looking for eye contact? So I think because of the environment where we operate in, sometimes certain behaviors are not really accepted socially.
Do you think who you are is something to be discovered or something to be decided on and made or acted towards? Do you think who we are is something we can discover or something we become?
I'm gonna pick the easy way, a bit of both, probably. I do believe that you can progress in avenues that you decide to progress, so you can become a better person. I'd like to believe that. Otherwise, I would just say that everything is predetermined. You just the way you are, and you can't change it. That's a quite doomed sort of look on life and existence, isn't it? Like, this is the way you are, you can't change it. Why would you even try? So I don't believe in predetermination. I believe in change. I'd like to believe that I am somebody else compared to who I was 10, 20 years ago. I'm becoming somebody else. But it's quite obvious that we all have some limitations. You cannot just become whoever you want to be, no matter how sexy it sounds, right? You do have limitations. You said that you, obviously one of the things that you want to be better at is dancing. Like, if your task would be to be a dancer in Bolshoi, which is the biggest ballet in Moscow, can you still achieve that?
No.
And obviously that's age plays a huge part in it as well. The older you get, the more limited what you can achieve as well in life in general.
Yeah. I suppose actually that's a good example, because if that little deluded part of me was to want to become the best salsa dancer in the world, I think it is possible to do it without having gotten into it at a young age. But something like ballet and Bolshoi basically can't do it. Like, aside from the obvious massive physical changes I need to do, which is probably lose a lot of weight, change my body proportions quite a lot, like completely change how fit in what way I am, I think that is something that just would not happen.
And I also see accepting these limitations as part of the maturation process. The older you get, ideally the more mature you are in terms of, obviously physically as well, unfortunately. Hopefully up here as well, you're getting more mature, you call it wiser, call it accepting yourself and your surroundings and your surroundings, pros and cons, weaknesses and strengths, and the limitations that you face in life as time progresses. But you find with that, you can still pick a few things that you want to focus on, but it's gonna be narrower. It doesn't mean that you can't achieve anything just because you're getting older, but you have to be a little bit more selective on what you want to focus on, in my opinion.
What parts of your character have you accepted that this is the hand you've been dealt with, this is just who you are, not really open to change? Might be able to develop it to not be it temporarily, but it's just not part of who you are. So with me, I know I'm a quiet person. I know as much as I can learn how to be social and extroverted and how to network and whatever. At my core, I like peace and quiet. I prefer very much one-to-ones or like small groups as opposed to big public events. I know that at my core, I just really like video games. But again, maybe it's just because I grew up with it. That's a difficult thing because it's a modern thing. Groups are not my thing. I'm very introverted at my core. I know I prefer nature and suburban type areas to the hustle and bustle of the city. Do you have any things that you just know, like, this is just who I am? Beyond the superficial things like, I like gym or I like my beard.
I have certain things that I value highly, and I would say that that's who I am. It's not necessarily associated with personality traits. Like, I can be an introvert, but I can be an extrovert as well, depending on the situation and depending on the people who are around me as well. So for me, it's hugely dependent on multiple factors. I don't necessarily believe that there are quintessential introverts and extroverts. It is probably a bit of a scale, right? However, that I do have things that I sort of stand for or that are meaningful in my life, and my life would lose certain meaning without them, without those things being present in my life. And that's obviously sport, physical exercise, culture. I'm very close to arts, be it films, films and music, probably the biggest things, but also books and any form of culture, any form of art that's put out there for the viewer, me, to have a catharsis, right? And it's not there for entertainment. I think that's the big divisive line between entertainment. When you watch a film, you want to be entertained, right? That's the common conception, right? Now, for me, I don't want to be entertained. I want to know a little bit more about things around me when I watch a film. I don't want to switch off. I want to switch on. When I read a book, I don't want to switch off. I want to switch on. I want to look at something or observe something that shows me something that I didn't know before, or show me a different perspective that I did not have before. So therefore, I know a little bit more about this world around me.
That's very interesting, because I'm thinking about how I like to consume, whether it's games or shows or movies, and actually it's a really nice way to put it. I am seeking a cathartic experience. The movies that are like brain dead, essentially, I don't like to watch. But then what's the difference between that and the movies I do like to watch? I feel like I've learned something about myself or the world. I feel like I've changed. I feel like, as silly and a bit cringy as it sounds, I've adopted part of a character who I admire's personality into mine a little bit. It's made me feel something, not something to turn my brain off on. Like, even when I play games, I don't play games where I just like turn into a zombie. And then that raises the question, is there anything you ever do to specifically turn your brain off? Other than sleep?
In a way, training, exercising is because you get into this state of flow is to a certain degree turning your brain off. Like, yes, you are thinking of the technique, but you've done it so many times that it's deeply embedded into who you are. You don't really need to, you can still get a connection with your body whilst you are in this flow state. So to a certain degree, that's switching off, and that's physical meditation. And when you watch a film as well, when you really tune in and you are part of that world, you can sort of switch off whilst you switched on as well. I know it sounds counterproductive, but you are in that flow state. So you can still have ideas in your head whilst you are in that switched off state.
Is a flow state turning your brain off, or is it just you're so efficient and proficient that your brain is still on, but it's not that much active work? And
I'm not familiar with the very definition of flow state, but I would say you are active within the process, but it takes you. You are riding that wave. Like I've never surfed before in my life, but it's like, I guess it's like surfing. You are active. You can't just switch off on that surfboard, right? So you are active, but you're enjoying the process. You smooth. You're there, physically and mentally as well, but not 100%. Like, you don't need to focus on it. You're not flexing. You're not grinding, but you are in control. Probably that's the way I would put it. You are in control, but you let things happen with you.
If we use the definition of turning off as simply letting your brain just be, not necessarily needing to put any energy into something, the only thing I can think of that would not be a waste of time and actually good is, for example, if you just try and be maybe present while you're sitting next to the river. If something nature related or something, I suppose, physically meditative, like sitting down and meditating, because the more I think about this, I've never thought about this before, I wouldn't want to be brain dead for anything I do. You'd think like, oh, it's a long day of work, I want to come home and turn my brain off. I don't think you do, or not in the way that it might sound. You don't want to just, at least for me, I don't want to watch these reality shows where I just stare at it and turn into a zombie. But then maybe for other people,
I think that's where your authentic personality comes in the picture as well. For some people, that can be the form of meditation on their level.
Yeah.
Not looking down on them, but for me, it isn't. So you need to find your own way of, let's call it meditating. You're not technically meditating, but if you find meditation or flow, or like, that is me, that I'm connecting with myself and the world, and I lose myself in the process. Whether it's training, it's watching a film, it's sitting next to a river, going for a walk in the forest. It's whatever wherever you find this thing. However, it's limited by what you have an opportunity for as well, because it might be I don't know, going for a walk in the Andes, but you're not physically there right now, so good luck, so you have to ideally you find it within your proximity, physically and mentally as well.
I guess the phrase turning your brain off isn't, I think, what you would think it means, because you think it just means you become placid and passive and you do nothing, but actually it's just you do something that you're proficient enough at that while your brain is on, you get into that flow and it doesn't feel like work. If I'm in a lesson for dance, I have to stay really actively switched on because I'm learning new things. I'm trying to turn the chaos of the unknown, what I don't know, into something I understand, into the order. But if I'm doing social dancing and I haven't learned anything new for a while, I've done these thousands of times, I'm still on, but I'm efficient with it, I'm comfortable. So maybe keeping your brain on is just wanting to learn more so that the flow is more easily accessible.
Probably. Maybe you have to be on a certain level within that
Yeah.
thing in order to switch to that state.
Yeah.
Yes, probably it's true. Although sitting next to a river, I don't know what skill set it takes. But it probably takes a certain level of consciousness or understanding why you're sitting there in the first place as well, to stare at the river and be lost in the sight of those waves.
Exactly. I think there's a certain amount of knowledge you need to know what is the benefit of me focusing on what I can hear. What is the benefit of me just focusing on individual rocks in the stream getting pushed apart, to which I would say there's actually a lot. That's another thing. So yeah, it would be wasted on someone who doesn't know it. Just like if you train to go to the gym out of necessity and reluctance and you genuinely don't see any value in it, it will be wasted on you. But I agree, you definitely need to be good enough to get into that flow state. I was talking with a dancer friend of mine last week who is an amazing follower, but she's new to leading. And she's like, bro, my brain has to be so on. I feel like I'm doing the same 4 moves. She said this, I've achieved flow state in a dance maybe 3 times in the past 2 years. So yeah, definitely have to get good at it. That's why when we show clients exercises or when I see a dancer doing something, the words we always use are, it looks effortless, because they're just that good at it. You would want to be taught by someone who makes it look effortless. And that's what I always say. I say, well, if I was struggling with it and I'm showing you how to do it, you should get a different trainer.
And to do anything on the long run, you have to a certain extent, enjoy it as well. You can't, you can only force something on yourself for so long. So ideally, that's why you want to communicate to people that they are in on the long run, and you don't have to push on them methods that they just hate doing. So you have to find a way that they enjoy it. It is productive. They are building, but they don't mind doing it. And it's sometimes very hard to figure that out with this certain person, because yes, they get results. Yes, they are looking better. They are stronger, but they don't like doing it. Sometimes the truth is maybe this way of physical exercise is not for them. Maybe another method would be better for them. However, this is when the good old capitalists, business-minded thinking kicks in. Yes, but then you're gonna give up on that income, right? If you tell them, maybe it's not for you, mate. Maybe you should do, I don't know, basketball or table tennis, whatever. This is not like you don't enjoy, you hate doing it. Every time you come in, you're like, oh my god, I hate this shit. Do I have to do it? No, you don't have to do it. You don't technically have to do anything in life. Is it good for you? Yes, it is good for you. It helps your longevity. But I mean, but you don't want to force them to do it.
I think because of the culture and the way the society is structured, we have a massive privilege, which is being able to try and do something that actually fulfills us. So even with fitness, for example, if you're like a new trainer and you're very dogmatic in your ways and you're just set, like, no, this is the correct way, there's nothing else. Your clients and you need to balance the effectiveness of the training with the fun. To me, I always try and treat it with my clients like this is basically just a big playground. I'm just here to show you what's actually going to get you where you want to be. There's no one exercise that's necessary. One of my clients the other day, for some reason, could not do Bulgarian split squats. Not because he lacked the mobility or strength. His brain just wasn't computing that day, and he just couldn't do it properly. He'd stop maybe a fifth of the way. And he was like, no, this is making me angry that I can't do it. I'm like, okay, we don't do it. We'll save it for another day, or better yet, we do something else. Find something that works for you, whether it's a training style, whether it's a workout program, even the coach that you train with. Like, when all is said and done, our only unique selling point as self-employed people, I suppose, is our personal brand, is who we are. I was talking about this the other day. It's quite funny because I didn't think about this until recently. When I first started as a trainer, I thought, okay, what's my niche? okay, powerlifting, martial arts, whatever. But now I think I was asked, what is your niche? What makes you unique? My instinctive answer was, well, obviously it's these things, bodybuilding style, calisthenics, whatever. But I thought, actually, no, not really. Like, I know a fair amount of enough styles, but the thing that makes me unique the most is actually who I am. It's the approach to the training. It's how fun I make it for them. It's the jokes I crack. It's the balance between knowing how to be militant versus I'm a friend, sort of, to you. I'm not here to turn you into a professional athlete. I'm not here to drill you like an instructor. I'm here to guide you and show you what could work for you for the rest of your life. And I think that's a big thing people don't realize. Like, yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, you need to push yourself, but you need to enjoy while you're doing it. And a big way to enjoy it is to know why you're doing it. So know your why. So it makes me sad, again, going back, when people, we were talking about this before the camera, when people don't know their why, but they don't want to know their why. You're missing like half of the fun, literally.
And also your niche can be understanding the person you're dealing with and picking the best methods and approaches for specifically them. Well, obviously that's not something that you can quantify, so probably in terms of business, it's not a sexy thing to sell.
Not at all.
Because what they want to hear is, I'm very good at fat loss, I'm very good at muscle building. These are the reviews on my services. I've got this many followers, and then it's just quantifiable numbers game, right? Or a certain look or performance that you have and they had seen, and unfortunately, it's part whether or not unfortunately, but it's part of our industry. It's a very visual industry, isn't it? You look at a trainer, a personal trainer, you, to a certain degree, rightfully, you want that person to represent who you want to be. You want that person to be a kind of role model, like you want to be like them one day, possibly. So they need to be authentic within their roles. But at the same time, what you can't see, what kind of people they are and how they deal with, human beings, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I think there's an unlimited potential for growth for everyone, including me, possibly including you, everyone, right? We can always provide a little bit better service all around in terms of obviously programming, but dealing with that person who's in front of us as well.
Are you trying to say I'm not perfect the way I am? Are you trying to tell me I can improve?
Your beard is perfect the way it is.
Thank you very much. So I don't need to ever improve it for the rest of my life.
No, you don't.
I've got 3 quotes to finish with that I want to get your thoughts on. One was some social media post. I forgot who said it, I don't know what. But it was something where they said, for every muscle an athlete or a bodybuilder has, that is a book that they haven't read, or a language they haven't learned, or a skill they haven't developed. What do you think of that?
Say it again. I need to absorb it.
For every muscle that an athlete or a bodybuilder has, like big ones, it's a book that they haven't read, a language not learned, or a skill not developed.
So that refers to the fact that you spend so much time perfecting your body that there's a lot of things on the other side that you never got into. Am I getting it right?
Yes, but I think that's how we would interpret it if we said it. I think the underlying tone was any developed muscle is a wasted opportunity to do something else. So when we think body,
that's sort of how I got it as well. Yes, but again, we got back to that, to whatever I sort of kept referring to throughout our conversation as well, finding that sort of balance. Like, yes, you can just read books, become a very educated, intelligent, smart man, and you just regard physical exercise as nonsensical. Why would I do that? My existence on this planet is surely reading books, being as smart and intelligent as I can be, and fuck being strong, fuck being muscular. That does not matter. Appearances don't matter. Physicality, my body doesn't matter. My mind is the important one. And obviously, according to this court, the other side of the argument would be, I am my body, so that like what I know of this world does not really matter as long as I look a certain part and I can perform to a certain degree, right? I think the answer must be somewhere in between, again on a scale, and that depends on the person as well. Like say if you look at people like Noam Chomsky or David Attenborough, I mean their bicep is not great, is it? The pecs could be a little bit more striated probably because they did not a lot of physical training throughout their lives. Is their life a failure? Absolutely not. But they are the best in something that's within their niche. They are some of the smartest and best people, right? Whilst on the other part, do we say that anyone who trains, who goes into a gym to look better, that's a missed opportunity because they could have stayed home and read Unbearable Lightness of Being from Milan Kundera? They can probably do both. And they're not going to max out on any. However, as human being, these can be yin and yang, complementary to each other. They don't have to be opposing forces. That's why, or maybe I'm just saying this because I'm very biased towards this yin and yang thing. Because to me, culture and sports, they are complementary and they are like yin and yang. And I try to, for a long time, I felt like I don't belong to this world because that is still important to me. But I don't belong to that world because that is still important to me. And it took me personally a long time to accept that, so I'm actually a citizen of both worlds and it's fine. I belong here, amongst the geeks who don't train, and for them appearance doesn't matter and physical training doesn't matter. But then I belong here as well, where probably that world does not matter.
So that nicely leads into the other quote by Thucydides, which was, "The society that separates its scholars from its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and fighting done by fools." What do you think of that?
Who said that?
Thucydides.
Ooh, wow. Okay, so we're going back to the ancient times.
Well, the philosophers, like even with Plato, a lot of the time people don't realize he was a good wrestler. And if I'm not mistaken, the name Plato was his wrestler name because of, I think, his broad shoulders or something. It was to do with just brute strength. So we think of these, like all their quotes, Greek philosophers, they were so enlightened, they were. But they put a big emphasis on physical training as well.
So maybe coincidentally, I just agreed with the sort of approach of the ancient Greco-Roman approach to philosophy and physicality, because both worlds were really important to them. Obviously, that's one of the breeding grounds of philosophy, literature, art. But within their art as well, physicality is massively represented. Just have a look at those ancient Greek or Roman sculptures.
Built.
Those guys would be some seriously followed fitness influencers these days, right?
Especially with the beards.
Exactly, they have great beards, six-pack, muscles.
Yeah.
So if that had not been the ideal of the time, those would be just some average looking people. But no, they did not see like that. For them, that was the physical ideal of a man. Or obviously women were curvier, but still obviously, very aesthetic. So they did have an aesthetic ideal, whilst obviously they were pushing, seeking meaning in the world and searching for answers and literature and arts. So both worlds coexisted within their worldview. Yes.
you did basically agree with, or your natural philosophy that you've come to is in alignment with some of the greatest ones that ever lived. What do you make of that quote specifically? Do you want to say it again?
Yeah, say it again.
The society that separates its scholars from its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and fighting done by fools.
I'm just thinking of societies that had actually... the stereotypical answer would be that Sparta was obviously a place where, probably because they were intellectually not quite up there with Athens, they focused on warriors and breeding these like jagged army guys, and physicality was everything. If you were not good enough physically, you were put to death, literally. And then Athens prided itself on obviously being the intellectual force as well, right? And then which one is the ultimate answer, right?
Is the difference between those two, though, that they were both very much at the extremes of each end? Like, would you go as to say the Athenians were, the thinking was done by the cowards, and in Sparta, would you say that the fighting was done by fools? Or did they find that good balance, but they were just also really good at the fighting and really good at the thinking? Like, if I look at society now, there is very little overlap between the physical and the philosophy. Hence why
I think in terms of how much influence they had on history, obviously Athens won that fight. So probably intelligence and to this, according to this quote, being cowards had won. So probably that's a little bit more important in terms of progressing humankind than physicality, which is likely to be true, but it doesn't mean that physicality is not important at all.
However, the thinkers that we still remember from the Athenian times, they definitely did not separate the physical from the thinking, as we can see by the statues and even just what they held as the ideal. So they came out as more influential, but was that success afforded to them because they weren't only thinkers? Because they also integrated it?
Certain philosophers, yes, they took care of their bodies as well, but certain others, like the OG of all philosophers, Socrates, as one of my heroes, but he was not known for his manly appearance and
yeah.
He was according to obviously the legends, he was a little fat man wandering around in Athens, going to the markets and just talking to people and arguing them for the argument's sake. So it's just like a little annoying fat man. So yes, it does depend on which philosopher we're talking about.
Could it be that it was a realization that his students came to over time? If I'm not mistaken, was it that Socrates was the mentor of Aristotle, which then went to Plato?
Yes, yeah, that is.
So Plato was the most hench one. Could it be once he adopted that school of thought, then he realized, oh, I need to include the training in as well?
Maybe it's that progress, but it could come down to the individual. It could be just an individual thing that, like, maybe Plato could have gotten there intellectually without the physical training as well. Quite likely. But because of the person that he was, he regarded physical exercise or being fit as a complementary thing to who he was authentically.
Do you think it's a bias that we have?
I don't think that things are always necessarily logical, or they can always be explained within the big context, basically.
Yeah. Do you think we have a little bit of a bias because we are in the world of training? If I think of all great minds that I respect, I know for a fact I would respect them more if they were also in better shape. Is that just because, me personally, I value the physical activity, or objectively there is an argument to be made that your mind would also be sharper and your legacy could also potentially be more credible if your body also followed your mind?
I think it's a conforming reassurance of the values that you believe in. To find people in history
I thought
that
you'd
were
say that.
great minds, but they also had great bodies, or they looked good, or they represented certain things that you believe in as well. And I think it makes you feel, and makes me feel good as well. Of course, that includes me also. And there are figures like you mentioned, Plato, but for example, to me, one of the great philosophers and novelists of the 20th century, a French guy called Albert Camus, and he's a French Algerian writer. He was extremely handsome. He was a football player. In fact, when he was young, he was asked by one of his friends, what does he keep in higher regard, football or theatre? And he said, football by all means. And he then went on and wrote massively influential philosophical work. He got Nobel Prize in literature as well. And he did write one of my favorite essays, The Myth of Sisyphus. So that's the story of Sisyphus is really close to me, because that can be used as a metaphor for life training, whatever it might be. Obviously, the man who's pushing the boulder uphill only for the boulder to come back down, and it starts again and again and again. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, and that's the quintessential conclusion for Albert Camus as well on Sisyphus. But Sisyphus is happy doing that. So he's happy for that nonsensical task, which basically that was the driving force behind his philosophy as well. He belonged to a branch of existentialist philosophers. So he was searching for meaning in life, because he just thought that life and existence was absurd. We're here without meaning and we can't find it, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. We can still be happy. We can still be content, even if we don't necessarily find meaning, right?
It's very reminiscent of this. Are you familiar with Jocko Willink? Retired Navy SEAL commander, big podcast now, author. I admire him quite a lot. And he has this thing, I think he said it, if not some of his guests on the show, which is that the obstacle is the way. And it's very reminiscent of that. If I'm not mistaken, I think I read a little bit. The myth of Sisyphus isn't actually that much to do with Sisyphus himself. It's a question of, is suicide a valid ethical conclusion or something?
Yes, yeah. So Albert Camus was searching for the ultimate question,
which is,
and he had come to the conclusion that the real question is, why wouldn't we commit suicide? If life is ultimately meaningless and absurd, why should we still live it? And then the essay goes on and explores why we should still be here on this planet. And quite funny how Camus, as I mentioned, he was an extremely handsome man, heartthrob. He was the Brad Pitt of his time. He was on the cover of Vogue magazine. He was photographed for it, and that's not your usual philosopher. Most philosophers got into philosophy because they were very they were ugly, or they were challenged in sexual performance, like Schopenhauer. Nietzsche was fucked up in everything in his life as well. So Albert Camus did come from a completely different background as well, and he still became one of the most known existentialist philosophers. And when he was 46, so he was afraid of driving cars, so he always took the train, and his publisher offered him to take him from point A to point B. He already had a ticket for the train. It's like, all right, I go in, and he died in that car accident. So inadvertently, his publisher killed him. I mean, I don't know what sense that makes within his philosophy, but it's very interesting and intriguing.
It is, and this idea that he was the playboy, he was the Casanova, he had the things that, when typical philosophers think the way they do and they ask what they do, we think, oh, this is just because you lack this and this is a coping mechanism. For him to have all of this and still have that message, that's when you can't really poke any holes in why do you think that. It's like, oh, you don't have to think this at all, but you still got to it. It reminds me of Jim Carrey, for example, peak of fame in Hollywood, one of the most famous people ever. Yet he has this message now, like, this is all pointless. It doesn't mean much. Like, you reach the top and then you realize it is worthless. So I think we see a lot of that with, again, this idea of perfection. I need to be the most famous. I need to get the biggest body. I'm sure even, I haven't listened to much, but even Chris Bumstead, I'm sure maybe he has something similar. If not, I'm sure he will when he's a bit older.
I'm pretty sure if you're a thinking man, at a certain point of your life, you come to a conclusion that this is you ask that question, what's the point? It's meaningless. Whether or not you overcome this or how you deal with it, what answers you give to that question is that can obviously vary to a certain degree, but you will come to that junction.
Yeah.
When you ask that question from someone, what's the point of all this? Why am I here? And that's why philosophy was born. Right?
Yeah.
And yes, these are like reconnecting to your question as well. Yes, we have these almost like role models who were physical but philosophical at the same time as well, whether Plato, Albert Camus, Lord Byron, another one as well, extremely famous English poet, and at the time very handsome man, and he believed in physical exercise and diet, although his diet advice wouldn't be that great today, because he was I believe eating only biscuits and soda and drinking soda water for days.
Sure.
And then for the following few days he was eating potatoes with lots of vinegar. So many of his female followers would just started drinking pints of vinegar and they died, according to urban legends. So some of the diet fads at the time as well were just crazy. But obviously that was before de facto science. In fact, in the 19th century, and that's what probably the first half-legit diet book was written in 1863 by a guy called William Banting, who was an undertaker, an obese undertaker, and he was fed up with the fact that he was fat and he wanted to lose weight, and he came up with a methodology that worked for him. And then he wrote a book based on his experiences called Letter on Corpulence. Wouldn't be so politically correct these days. And Banting at the time was the synonym for dieting. So people said I'm banting.
I feel like I've heard that expression somewhere before in some context. It's funny to look at the history of what we thought diet was, and now nutrition science and whatever has taken its place. The final quote I want to leave on, which is I want to also get your opinion on, is from Socrates, which was, "No citizen has a right to be an amateur in the matter of physical training. What a disgrace it is for a man to grow old without ever seeing the beauty and strength of which his body is capable of."
I've heard that quote, of course, and that's like almost like a meme within our industry. But despite what I believe in and who I am, I think it's force. You have a right to be an amateur, and you have a choice to make. You don't have to max out everything physically that you have within you, because there's no one right way in life, and that has to be physicality. Although this quote is claimed to be said by Socrates, there's no evidence of it. And I doubt that it was said by him.
Given he was a short, fat old man.
Based on the fact that he was a short old man, I doubt that he said it.